All right, ready to dive into something pretty cool.
I'm all ears. What are we diving into today?
Today, it's all about getting you ready for a calculation engineer interview.
Ooh, nice. Love it.
We're talking like walking into that interview and you feeling like you could teach the interviewer a thing or two about the job.
I like that. That's
Uh,
the kind of confidence we want. And the good news is we've got some awesome resources from RoleCatcher to help us out. We're going to be using their career guide, Calculation Engineer, along with their interview guide, Calculation Engineer, as our sort of roadmap today.
Awesome. So to kick things off, I guess the first question is, what does a calculation engineer actually do? I mean, we've all seen those, kind of dry job descriptions out there, but what's the day-to-day really like?
You can think of it like being a digital architect, but instead of buildings, you're analyzing the strength, the stability of different systems, all through virtual experiments.
Like
You're
that.
going to be using software, building models, running simulations, predicting how things behave in the real world.
So like a virtual crash test for anything an engineer might design?
Exactly.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's a field that is in super high demand right now. The work is really intellectually stimulating, and the salary also reflects the responsibility that you have.
Okay, so high demand, intellectually stimulating, good salary. It's got to be a catch, right?
Well, the catch is be ready for some long hours and just the pressure that comes with making sure that all those calculations are accurate. Because after all, your work has a real impact on safety and functionality of real products and structures.
Right, no pressure. So let's say someone is up for the challenge. What kind of skill, what kind of knowledge do they actually need to have to succeed as a calculation engineer?
Well, RoleCatcher really emphasizes the importance of analytical skills, those decision-making skills. So you're going to need really top-notch reading comprehension, active listening, and of course, complex problem-solving, critical thinking.
Makes sense. I mean, you're not just crunching numbers, right? You need to understand the why behind the numbers, the bigger picture, and then actually make decisions based on what you find.
Exactly. And in terms of knowledge, you want to have a really strong foundation in engineering and technology concepts, especially mechanical and design principles.
All right, so we've got a decent grasp on the role itself. Let's get to the part that everyone dreads, the interview. How can RoleCatcher's AI help someone stand out from the competition?
Well, their Copilot AI is like having a personal interview coach right in your pocket.
Yeah.
So what it does is it analyzes the specific requirements of the job that you're applying for, and then it actually gives you these personalized recommendations on how to tailor your CV and your answers.
Wait, hold on. It analyzes your CV too.
Yes.
That's next level.
It is. It helps you pick out those keywords and skills that the hiring manager is looking for, and then suggests ways to weave them into your responses. And it can even analyze video practice sessions, giving you feedback on your delivery and the content.
That's incredible. Okay, so let's say you're prepping for your calculation engineer interview. What are some of the most common questions you should be ready for?
Well, one of the classics is, can you walk me through your experience working with software used for engineering calculations?
The classic, what software do you know question.
Yes.
All right, so every engineer has to be comfortable with different tools. What's the best way to approach this question?
Well, instead of just listing software names, like you said, focus on being specific. Talk about how you've used those specific pieces of software to solve real-world problems. So, for example, you could say something like, in a previous role, I used ANSYS to simulate the stress distribution on a bridge design under different load conditions. This helped us identify any potential weak points and then optimize the design for maximum strength.
Okay, so show, don't tell. Give me those specifics. Don't just say you know it. Explain how you've used it. All right, what about this one? What are the most important factors to consider when performing structural calculations?
Ooh, that's a good one. This is where you really want to demonstrate your deeper understanding of the principles. So highlight the factors that affect the accuracy and reliability of your calculations.
Okay, so what would some of those key factors be?
Well, you've got things like material properties, right? Which dictate how different materials will react under stress. And then you have your boundary conditions, which define how the structure is supported. And then, of course, load cases, which represent the different forces that are acting on that structure.
It's not just about plugging numbers into a formula. You really have to understand the physics behind it all.
Exactly. Now, this next question is really a big one because it's all about ensuring the integrity of your work. How do you ensure the accuracy of your calculations?
That's a great question. I mean, you don't want to be the engineer who designs a bridge that collapses. What's the best way to answer that one?
Yeah. This is where you're going to really want to showcase your meticulous process, right? Your attention to detail. Talk about things like double-checking your units, comparing your results to benchmarks, and using those independent verification methods. So you can say something like, I always double-check my units to avoid errors, and I compare my results to industry standards whenever possible. And if I do find any discrepancies, I investigate them thoroughly to ensure the accuracy of my work.
So basically you're saying, I'm not just spitting out numbers, I'm making sure these numbers are rock solid.
Exactly. And that's exactly what hiring managers are looking for.
Now, I know a lot of calculation engineer roles involve finite element analysis, FEA. What if the interviewer asks, can you explain your experience with finite element analysis?
That's a common one. And just like the software question, you want to give them a very concise overview of what it is, and then jump right into your specific experience.
Okay, so for someone who might not be familiar with FEA, what exactly is it?
Well, FEA is a really powerful tool that lets you analyze very complex structures by breaking them down into smaller, simpler elements. So it's like taking a puzzle apart, right? You study each piece individually to understand how they all fit together.
Okay, that's a great analogy. Now, how would you weave your experience into that answer?
So let's say you use FEA to analyze a wind turbine blade. You could say, in a previous project, I used FEA to simulate the behavior of a wind turbine blade under extreme wind conditions. This helped us optimize the blade design for maximum efficiency and durability. And you can even mention those specific software packages you use for FEA, like ANSYS or ABAQUS.
Okay, so again, it's about providing those concrete examples. Show, don't just tell. What about when they ask something like, how do you approach a complex calculation problem? That seems like a pretty open-ended question.
It is. But that's your chance to highlight those problem-solving skills. Don't panic when you hear that question. Instead, explain how you'd break down that complex problem into smaller, more manageable steps. So you might say something like, well, first, I try to really understand those underlying principles and assumptions involved. Then I'll break the problem down into smaller components, and I'll tackle each one by one. I'll use a combination of analytical methods, simulations, and of course my engineering judgment to arrive at a solution.
Right, so it shows you can think strategically, you can think systematically, even when you're under pressure. What's next on our list of common interview questions here?
Well, let's talk about staying current, right? Because things are changing all the time in this field. An interviewer might ask, how do you stay up to date with advancements in the field of calculation engineering?
Ooh, that's a good one. So this is all about demonstrating your commitment to continuous learning. What are some good ways to showcase that?
You want to highlight how you actively seek out new knowledge. So mention things like attending conferences, reading industry publications, maybe taking some online courses, or even participating in research projects. So for example, you could say, I regularly attend conferences like the ASME Turbo Expo to learn about the latest advancements. I also subscribe to journals like the Journal of Engineering Mechanics and participate in online forums to discuss emerging trends.
So it's not just about keeping up, it's about actively engaging with the latest and greatest in the field. What about communication skills? Are those important for calculation engineers?
Absolutely, because oftentimes you're going to have to explain those complex calculations to people who don't have an engineering background. So an interviewer might ask you something like, how do you communicate complex calculations to non-technical stakeholders?
Yeah, that's a great point. You're not just working in a silo. You've got to be able to explain your work to colleagues, to managers, even clients sometimes.
Yeah.
How do you nail that question?
Well, you want to focus on your ability to simplify those complex concepts and tailor your language to your audience. So maybe you share a story like this. In a previous project, I had to explain a stress analysis to a client who didn't have an engineering background. So I used simple diagrams and analogies, and of course I avoided all the jargon just to help them understand the findings.
That's a fantastic example. It shows you understand the importance of meeting your audience where they are. What other interview questions should we be prepared for?
Okay, so let's jump back into those interview questions. A common one that really tests your problem-solving skills is, can you describe a time when you encountered a really difficult calculation problem and how you resolved it?
That's a good one. You really got to, think on your feet, overcome challenges. What makes for a good answer to that question?
You want to choose a situation that was truly challenging and walk the interviewer through your thought process, step by step. So don't just state the problem, explain how you tackled it, what methods you used, and of course, what the outcome was.
So really paint a picture for them. Make them feel like they're right there with you as you work through the problem. Got any examples?
Sure. So imagine you're tasked with analyzing the structural integrity of like an offshore platform, and your calculations are showing that it's not going to withstand the expected wave loads. Big problem, right?
Yeah, that's a big problem. Nobody wants to be responsible for an offshore oil platform disaster.
Yeah.
How would you handle that?
Okay, so first, I would meticulously review all the design specifications. Go back to those initial calculations, trying to pinpoint any potential areas for improvement. Then I would run simulations, using different software, maybe like ANSYS, AB2US, to cross-validate those initial findings.
Right, so double-checking your work is super important there, especially when safety is involved. What if you still can't figure out the problem? What do you do then?
That's when you bring in the team, right? Consult with those senior engineers or subject matter experts, get their insights and perspectives. Collaboration is key in these kind of situations.
Okay, so don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Now, what if the interviewer asks you about a time when you had to make a significant design change based on your calculations?
Well, that's another opportunity to really highlight those problem-solving skills and your adaptability. So choose a project where maybe your calculations revealed a critical flaw and explain the steps you took to actually rectify it.
Yeah, so it's all about showing that you can take action, make those critical decisions when you need to. Okay, what about this one? What emerging trends in calculation engineering are you most interested in and why?
Oh, I like this question. This is where you get to showcase your passion for the field, your commitment to continuous learning. So think about those cutting-edge technologies or those innovative approaches that you're really eager to learn more about. Don't hold back your enthusiasm here.
So what are some trends that you find particularly interesting?
Well, personally, I'm fascinated by the growing role of machine learning and AI in engineering. I mean, these technologies have the potential to really revolutionize how we design, how we analyze systems.
That's a great example. And, you can even mention how you're actively trying to learn about those areas, whether it's through online courses, workshops, or even just following industry experts.
Absolutely. It really shows that you're not just content with the status quo. You're actively seeking to, expand your knowledge and stay ahead of the curve.
Okay, so we've talked about those technical skills, problem solving, staying current. What about those softer skills like communication? Are those important for calculation engineers?
They are. Being able to communicate complex technical information really clearly and concisely is crucial. So you might get a question like, can you describe a time when you had to present your calculations to a more technical audience?
Yeah, that's a great point because you're not just working in isolation. You need to be able to explain what you're doing to colleagues, managers, even clients in some cases. So what makes a good answer to this question?
Focus on how you actually structured your presentation, how you anticipated and answered questions, and how you incorporated feedback. So did you use visuals effectively? Did you adjust your explanation based on, the audience's understanding?
It's about showing that you can break down those complex concepts into, those digestible pieces and engage your audience.
What about those situations where you have like conflicting requirements or constraints in a design? That seems like a pretty common challenge in engineering.
Oh, it definitely is. So an interviewer might ask, how do you handle situations where there are conflicting requirements or constraints in a design? So how do you answer that? Think of a time where you had to balance those competing priorities, like safety, performance, cost, and time. Explain how you weighed the pros and cons of each option and how you ultimately arrived at a decision.
So it's all about showing that you can think critically, you can evaluate trade-offs, and you can make those tough decisions. Got any examples for us? Let's say you were designing a new suspension system for a sports car. You would have to balance ride comfort with handling performance, all while staying within a certain budget. You could explain how you use like a multi-objective optimization approach to explore different design configurations and find the best compromise.
That's a great example. It really highlights your ability to use those sophisticated tools and techniques to find the optimal solutions.
Right. Another question that might come up is, how do you ensure that your calculations are validated and meet industry standards and regulations?
Yeah, this is all about quality control, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about getting the numbers right, but making sure those numbers meet all those necessary requirements.
Exactly. You want to highlight that meticulous approach to verification and documentation.
So, what are some key things to mention in your answer?
Well, you want to talk about those independent verification methods that you use, like hand calculations or simulations using different software. You want to mention how you document all your assumptions, all your calculations, and you want to say that you regularly review your work with senior engineers to ensure that consistency and compliance.
Great points. It shows you understand the importance of following those best practices and ensuring the quality and reliability of your work.
Right. And this is really where RoleCatcher's Copilot AI can come in and help you refine those answers. So by analyzing the job description and your specific experiences, it can give you suggestions on how to really tailor your responses to highlight the most relevant skills and knowledge.
That's super helpful. It really takes a lot of the guesswork out of the interview prep and just gives you a more personalized edge.
It does. And just remember, the more you practice, the more confident and comfortable you're going to feel when that actual interview arrives.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Technical skills, problem solving, communication. What else should we be prepared for in a calculation engineer interview? All right, so let's wrap up our calculation engineer interview prep with maybe a few final questions that might come up. We've talked about technical skills, we've talked about problem solving, we've talked about communication. What about teamwork?
Yeah, teamwork. Teamwork is super crucial in this field. I mean, you're rarely working in isolation, right? So an interviewer might ask something like, can you describe a situation where you had to work with a team member who had a different approach to solving a calculation problem? And how did you handle that situation?
Ooh, I like this one. That classic clash of engineering minds. I'm sure that happens a lot. So what's the key to navigating those situations effectively?
Well, I think it's about finding that balance, right? Between advocating for your own approach, but also being open to different perspectives. You want to show that you're a team player, you can collaborate effectively, even when there's some disagreements.
So it's not about winning an argument, right? It's about finding the best solution for the team, for the project. What's a good way to illustrate that in your answer?
Yeah, you could say something like, in a previous project, I was working with a teammate on a fluid dynamics simulation, and we had different ideas about the best modeling approach. So I took the time to understand my teammate's reasoning. And we had a discussion about, the pros and cons of each method. We even ran simulations using both approaches just to compare the results.
Oh, that's a great example. So it shows you're willing to listen, you're willing to compromise, and ultimately let the best solution win. Right?
Exactly. Now, kind of shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about motivation. Because calculation engineer work, it can be demanding, it requires a lot of focus. So an interviewer might ask something like, how do you stay motivated when working on, highly technical, complex calculations that might take a really long time to complete?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really gets at the heart of what drives you as an engineer. What are some things you should highlight in your answer?
Well, this is your chance to show that passion for the field, your ability to really stay focused when you're faced with these challenging tasks. So you could talk about the intellectual stimulation you get from solving complex problems, or just that satisfaction of seeing your calculations come to life in those real-world applications.
It's about finding that inner drive that keeps you going, even when things get tough.
Yeah. And you could mention specific strategies you use to stay on track, maybe like breaking those big tasks into smaller milestones, setting realistic deadlines for yourself.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having that big picture vision, but also being able to focus on the smaller steps to get there.
Right. Now, for our last question, let's talk about something that's really crucial in any engineering field: ethics. So an interviewer might ask, imagine you're working on a project and your calculations indicate a potential safety issue. What steps would you take to address that situation?
Ooh, that's a big one. I mean, it's not just about the technical skills, it's about judgment, it's about your commitment to safety.
It really is. And your answers should highlight that ethical decision-making process, that commitment to doing what's right, even when it's difficult.
So how would you approach this question?
Well, first I'd emphasize, the importance of verifying those initial calculations, making sure. And then I'd explain that I would immediately, bring that potential safety issue to the attention of my project manager, to those relevant stakeholders. And from there, it's about collaboration, working together to find a solution that puts safety first.
I think that's a great response.
Yeah.
It shows you're not afraid to speak up when you see a problem and that you understand that, safety has to come first. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our calculation engineer deep dive.
I think so.
We covered so much from, the core skills and knowledge you'll need to those really tricky interview questions that might come up. But remember, preparing for these interviews, it's about more than just memorizing answers. It's about really understanding that role, highlighting your unique experiences, your strengths, and showcasing that passion for solving those complex engineering challenges.
Right. And don't forget to check out those great resources from RoleCatcher, especially that Copilot AI. It's a phenomenal tool for tailoring your CV, your responses, and it can really give you that extra edge in your job search.
It's like having a personalized career coach right in your pocket, guiding you every step of the way. So go out there, rock those interviews, and land that dream job as a calculation engineer. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.